So hello and welcome to another episode of TopTenz. I'm your interim host Karl Smallwood, that is Karl with a K, Smallwood with a small, followed by a wood. And today we're talking about 10 of the most haunted houses in America. And normally at this point in the video, I'd encourage you, the audience at home, to go give a follow to the person who originally wrote the script for today's video. And I can't do that today because I wrote the script. There was some shenanigans, shall I say, behind the scenes. Rather than get into that, let's just get right into the video. Someone once joked that the abundance of haunted houses across the United States may have something to do with the fact that the whole country is quite literally built upon an Indian burial ground. But as countless movies about that one house in Amityville have shown, not all houses are haunted equally. In fact, some appear to be just lousy with all kinds of ghosts and ghoulies. Or at least that's what the people who've spent an almost certainly sleepless night at one of the following homes would say. Starting with number 10, the Turner-Ingersoll Mansion in Massachusetts. A lot of bad stuff happened in the Salem witch trials, and while pop culture has exaggerated the extent to which women were persecuted by Puritans who believed they were the brides of Satan, it is known that at least a dozen women were hanged. And let's be honest, even if you don't believe in magic and wizards and witches and stuff, the souls of a bunch of people unjustly being killed, eternally tethered to a single place said to be corrupted by dark forces, is just gonna result in anyone even indirectly involved with their deaths being at least a little bit haunted, right? Which is why the story of the Turner-Ingersoll Mansion in Salem is just such a compelling haunted house tale. Alternately known as the House of Seven Gables, the house was a place famed author Nathaniel Hawthorne spent much of his childhood being regaled with stories of the town of Salem's witch murdering history, specifically the role his great-great-grandfather, Judge Haythorne, played in them. And for anyone curious about the difference in pronunciations and spelling there, Nathaniel Hawthorne is said to have added the W to his name specifically to distance himself from the, shall we say, unfortunate history of his family name. Notorious for his Puritan views and general dickishness, Judge Haythorne personally ordered the execution of several women on the basis that they had magical powers. Magical powers they seemingly didn't want to use to detonate one of his kidneys and fly out of the window to safety during one of their infamously torturous interrogations. Anyway, Haythorne died not really ever repenting for basically murdering a bunch of innocent women, and Hawthorne was deeply traumatized by what he learned about his life and actions. So much so that he believed the house was likely haunted by the mere association to his great-great-grandpappy's actions. Hawthorne was a cousin to the house's owners, you see. As for the ghosts said to inhabit the house, reports from those who visited say they've seen everything from a small child ghost to what they ominously describe as shadow people who linger on the periphery of your vision, silently observing and perhaps judging you for any of your ancestral mistakes. No wonder Hawthorne wanted to get the hell out of there. Moving on, number 9, the PCC Mansion in Portland. In most haunted house stories, the ghosts and demons giving the property a real good spooking are malevolent in nature, with their intent usually being to cause harm, whether it be emotionally or physically, to whoever is getting up all in their ghostly business. The ghosts said to haunt the PCC Mansion are a notable outlier to this generally accepted rule on ghosts. Specifically, the luxurious near 50-room mansion is said to be haunted by the couple who built it, Henry and Georgina PCC, with the leading theory from ghost experts and people selling tours of the mansion being that the couple just don't want to leave because, it's a really, really nice house. And looking at a picture of it, you can see why. That is a really, really nice house. They spent a lot of time and effort building this thing. No wonder they refused to leave it after they died. And arguably, the most common ghostly occurrence reported at the house is the sudden and inexplicable scent of roses while roaming what used to be the PCC's bedroom. For anyone wondering about the significance of such a scent, Georgina was obsessed with roses to the point she literally started a club celebrating them, the Portland Rose Society, an offshoot of which still celebrates the flower to this day. Other spooky goings on around the PCC Mansion include the sound of ghostly gardenings at all hours of the day and night with no apparent source for them, suggesting that even the PCC's groundskeeper is still milling around, and perhaps even more frighteningly, that we might all have to go to work even when we're dead. Moving on, once again, number 8, the Whaley House in California. As anybody who's played The Sims will tell you, the best way to ensure that a house gets good and haunted is to ensure a bunch of people die there. Taking the ladder off the pool, anyone? The more tragic and unexpected, the better, because people who died of old age don't tend to have much unfinished business on this mortal coil besides watching the rest of their programs? Well, in the case of the Whaley house, there was certainly no shortage of tragedy that befell former owner Thomas Whaley. Hell, even before the house was built, the land it stood on was a graveyard, a pretty solid way to ensure you get a visit from at least one ghost and perhaps even a skeleton. Anyway, after the house was built, Thomas's son and later his daughter both died in the home, with his son dying of scarlet fever at just 18 months and his daughter killing herself after her lover broke her heart at 22. Both of Thomas's children are said to still continue roaming the home as ghosts, with guests occasionally hearing the sound of tiny toddler footsteps, only interrupted by the unexplained giggling of a child or the haunting visage of a young woman endlessly wandering the halls, not really knowing what to do, which, yeah, sounds like someone in their 20s after a rough breakup. Moving on, number 7, Mark Twain's house, New York State. It's often said that fate or whatever divine unexplainable force guides our life, if it exists, almost certainly has a sense of humour, which, if true, is absolutely supported by the purported existence of ghosts in a house once occupied by noted author and mustache owner Mark Twain. This impressive, formidable brownstone was rumoured to be haunted long before Twain moved in. Not that the author cared. Twain was about as sceptical as they come, once reportedly responding to a ghost sighting by pulling out a gun and shooting at the phantom, which we should probably explain, right? So let's do that. So the story goes that Twain was aware of the house's ghostly reputation and didn't particularly give a shit. And one evening he saw a piece of wood in the fire begin to rise into the air as if carried by the hand of a spectre or perhaps a demon. We can't be sure. Whatever the case, Twain was not amused, pulled out a gun and shot the wood out of the air, leaving behind a large pool of blood. Blood, Twain insisted, must have come from a rat or something rather than a ghost, because ghosts don't exist, and if they do exist, they certainly don't bleed when shot. So what does all this have to do with fate having a sense of humour, you ask? Well, despite the fact Twain only lived in the house for a year and was a noted skeptic, one of the ghosts people have reported seeing since then is the ghost of Mark Twain himself, with one person claiming that the ghost of the author was none too pleased with being spotted and simply explained he had other matters to attend to before disappearing. Classic Mark. Moving on, number 6, the Farnsworth House Inn in Pennsylvania. So far in this video, we've mentioned places being haunted by like a couple of ghosts at most. So let's up the ante a little and talk about a house that's purported to be haunted by about a dozen. A veritable country coast jamboree up in here. Known as the Farnsworth House Inn today, this unassuming building was once a makeshift hospital during the Civil War, which probably has you thinking, so all the ghosts are soldiers then, right? Well, some of them are, with visitors reporting the sound of clacking boots at night as if the soldiers who died are still on patrol. However, there's also said to be the ghost of a young boy who frequently plays pranks on guests, and one said to belong to a midwife who hasn't clocked off her shift in about a century. Something we say because occasionally guests will report feeling as though they're being tucked in at night by the firm yet effervescent hand as they drift off to sleep, which sounds terrifying. Perhaps the most interesting presence, though, is one said to belong to a former kitchen cook who is occasionally seen just wandering around the kitchen looking for ingredients as if she's about to make a meal. And this apparition is said to be occasionally so clear that members of staff and customers have mistaken her for another member of staff. And on one occasion, the ghost is said to have pushed over a waitress who served an overcooked meal, which, if true, gives us at least some idea of what Gordon Ramsay is going to do when he dies. But let's move on once again to number 5, the LMP Mansion, Missouri. So we're about halfway through the video now, and it's probably a good time to note that we of course have no idea if ghosts exist, and there will no doubt be many skeptics watching this video. Hell, I'm a skeptic, but there's just something compelling about stories about ghosts. However, it's worth noting that a lot of people don't believe in ghosts simply because they can't fathom why someone would stick around for centuries after they died, because they're still a bit salty about it. Surely by that point they'd, get over it or consider doing something better with their unlimited free time, like flying to Mars or watching Marvel movies for free. Which is why the story of the hauntings and ghostly goings on at the LMP Mansion are, for lack of a better term, more believable, I guess. Something I say because one of the chief things people report seeing is the ghost of former owner and notorious womanizer William Lemp Jr. sneaking ghostly glances at women taking showers. Like, that's the only thing the ghost is said to do. Well, that and try and kick down the doors for fun, which is such a bizarrely specific thing to accuse a ghost of. I'm almost kind of sold on it. But we have to move on to number 4, the King House, Alabama. As we just talked about, for a ghost story to have that veneer of authenticity, there needs to be a reason for the severed spirit of a long-dead person to actually want to still hang around. which, if stories are to be believed, the ghost of Edmund King has in the form of a ton of gold reportedly buried somewhere on the grounds of the appropriately named King House. Now, the most popular phenomenon reported by people in and around the area is the sight of King himself, or at least his ghost, wandering around what used to be a peach orchard with a shovel and a lantern, endlessly searching for a treasure that's probably under a car park or something, if it ever existed at all. Although unusual things reported over the history of the house include stories of a roast pig coming back to life and squealing when guests tried to eat it during the Civil War, and the ghost of a mistreated child coming back from the afterlife, assuming the form of a massive bird and trying to peck the eyes of its mother out, which, again, is said to have happened during the Civil War and is easily in the top 10 cool things I've heard of a ghost reportedly doing. But once again, we move on to number 3, the LMP Mansion, Louisiana. So it's rare that a haunted house is better known for something other than being haunted, but such is the case for the LMP Mansion because of its association with perhaps the only thing more unexplainable than bumps in the night: Nicolas Cage. Yep, this is the haunted house that Nick Cage bought during that period he went kinda crazy and bought, among other things, a giant pyramid, an island, and an albino cobra he tried to write off on his taxes. But that's a story for another day, and trust me, it is a story. So Cage aside, the mansion is known for being the site of some truly gruesome scenes of torture and depravity, chiefly enacted by former owner Madame LaLaurie upon slaves, something authorities only learned about when one of her victims chose to set fire to the house, preferring to be burned alive than face another day with LaLaurie, which I think just goes to show how bad she was. I don't particularly like getting into gruesome details when I'm making these videos or writing scripts, but the stuff I learned is best left on the page. Since then, people reported everything from unexplained moaning to the sounds of footsteps, and students at a girls' school that used to use the building would sometimes wake up with random bruises or report being violently shoved down when walking the halls alone. This is consistent with reports of LaLaurie's behaviour, who is also said to have abused her own daughters along with her slaves, which is all good fun, but we know what you're thinking. What does Mr. Cage think about all of this? Well, Nick Cage reportedly bought the house precisely because of its notorious past, and according to some sources, spent all of a single night there before leaving and deciding that even he didn't want to deal with that level of crazy. Moving on, number 2, the Sallie House in Kansas. Now, normally ghosts are fairly indiscriminate when it comes to who they target, with just simply being in close proximity to whatever location they hang around being enough of an invitation for them to come and haunt your ass, which is what makes the ghost of the so-called Sallie House so curious. Named for a young girl purported to have lived there many years ago, the Sallie House is notoriously one of the most haunted private abodes in the US, with the seeming ire of Sallie's prepubescent post-life frustrations being men. And just to clarify, when I say private abode, this house frequently goes on sale and then is quickly removed from sale because people keep just making fake offers. Yeah, I found a bunch of articles while researching it, talking about them trying to sell this house and then having to take it down. And they either have to take it down because people keep responding with fake offers or because they wildly try to inflate the price based on its notorious past. But story for another day. To explain, according to legend, Sallie was killed in an operation gone wrong within the confines of her home. Most sources say an appendectomy, and since then has lingered on in ghost form, lashing out at anyone who resembles the man who took her life, which seems to be just any largish man wandering in or around the house. Now, the most notable victim of her ire was a guy called Tony Pickman, who, while living in the home, was reportedly scratched and bitten by an invisible entity, and on one occasion lifted clean into the air by it. Understandably, Tony moved out with his wife and newborn child soon thereafter, especially after hearing comments from neighbours about the lights to his child's room being left on all night, despite him and his wife both turning them off and moving his child to their room for its own safety. I'm going to move on to number 1, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington. Yes, the White House. A common thing used to discount a lot of ghost sightings is that the people who claim to have seen a ghost very often have quite a bit to gain from the natural interest and curiosity a building being big haunted generates, whether it be money or simple fame/infamy. For this reason, I'd like to retroactively add a disclaimer to each of the preceding entries that I feel isn't exactly necessary, but just in case. Yes, we know a lot of ghost sightings have very reasonable explanations, and most of them were probably exaggerated, if not outright made up. But it's exactly for this reason that stories about the White House being haunted are so interesting. By virtue of being the seat of power for the leader of the free world, anyone standing in the White House is likely already very powerful or successful in their chosen field, and they have very little to gain by having claimed to have seen a ghost. In fact, it's likely quite the opposite, and claims of seeing a ghost would no doubt be actively harmful to their reputation and/or standing. None of which has stopped various individuals, ranging from first ladies to, on one notable occasion, a queen, claiming to have spotted a ghost in the White House. And in regards to the latter, because you can't mention that without giving you some details, that story happened in 1942 when Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands fainted upon seeing the ghostly apparition of former President Lincoln stood outside of her bedroom door. What Lincoln wanted isn't clear. But what makes all of this even weirder is that the White House itself is seemingly aware of this and has on rare occasions admitted to service staff and even presidents being uneasy and feeling some kind of unexplainable presence while wandering the halls. For example, the non-profit the White House Historical Association notes that some presidents' dogs think the place is haunted, with President Reagan's dogs outright refusing to enter the Lincoln bedroom on numerous occasions, instead choosing to stand outside and just bark at it. Do you know, in that way dogs do, that's very unsettling. And let's be honest, while I don't really trust Ronald Reagan, I'm inclined to believe his dog that maybe something was up. And normally at this point in the video, I would say, hey, if you found this video to be entertaining, educational, or informative, go give the original author a follow on social media. But I was asked to just come in and rewrite this video, so I'm not going to do that, and instead reiterate that I would like people who are interested in writing and or research to maybe consider reaching out to the administrators behind the scenes to try your hand at writing an article for yourself. If you have the ability to research 10 loosely interconnected things and write an article linking them all together, we could pay you money for doing that, and you can see those words being read out by myself. We certainly have an opening for doing that, so if that interests you, let us know in the comments below and check out the links that have been provided. But besides that, I'd like to wish everyone out there the day that they deserve, and as always, cheers. See you all next time.